Good evening, colleagues. Good evening, friends. Let me start by greeting you in the most appropriate way. I think in many of the cultures and languages we speak, the best greetings include always, one very short word. In English, it's peace. In other languages, it's salam. In others, shalom, path, Frida, very short words, but with very deep meanings, which unfortunately the world is lacking, nowadays a lot. If I had the globe in front of me today and I turn it around and just by chance I put my finger somewhere, it's very likely that then my finger will be put in a place that is not normal. The place is not normal, maybe because there is a conflict. It is not normal because maybe there is a pandemic outbreak. It is not normal, maybe there is a natural disaster. It is not normal, maybe because it is a combination of all of those, at the same time. Of course, when we do our work, we approach it, from the different sectors that are all extremely helpful and useful for people. There is a shock. Now we come in, we provide health, that is absolutely right. There is no intervention that will be making any sense in a place that is not normal, where health is not a major component of. We bring water, we do hygiene and sanitation. Now we're starting to change and then learning by doing that we need also to bring in protection, helping people to recover what is most important to them, which is their human dignity. But most of the time what the people are crying for and they're craving for, they crave for normalcy. Because many a times, when I look at the eyes of gratitude, in the people that are benefiting from our interventions or support or help, whatever we call them, you can often, if we are very careful, see also some shame behind those eyes of gratitude. Why? Because it is so volatile that overnight, a doctor, a teacher, a father, a mother become overnight not Mr. So-and-so anymore, because they lost everything. They become the victim, they become the beneficiary, they become the displaced, they become the refugee. And those are not identities of anybody. These are situations that people find themselves in because of conditions and factors they have absolutely no control over. How to bring back normalcy, in what we're doing. And I think that's where the discussion we'll be having tonight will be very relevant in terms of leadership. How leadership will look like, in such settings, to respond to people's needs, to find solutions, to the problems. We can write books about it. We can qualify it, in many different ways. But if ultimately it doesn't solve problem, if ultimately it doesn't bring results, if ultimately it does not respond to people's needs, then there is no meaning, to that. So it is not normal today, that in my part of the world, that women are still dying while giving birth in big numbers. In my part of the world, in many other regions, today, You can see a child, born in a situation in a refugee camp, spent all his childhood in a situation of refuge. Be an adolescent, have refuge, and then start being an adult. Because now the average age, the average time of a refugee situation is 18 to 19 years. That's not normal. And how many people are in that setting? 110 million people. If a refugee setting was a country, today it will count, among some of the largest countries on the globe. But I think what we need to keep in mind when we talk about those situations is that even in situations, that globally seem to be normal, there will always be pockets. There will always be settings inside that are not normal. And that cohabitation is a deadly cohabitation. The poorest in the world today are not living in the poorest countries. They live in middle-income countries. And that's not healthy, to say the least. If you look at some minority groups in some of the largest and richest countries in the globe, you will find teenage pregnancy rates that are comparable, to the poorest countries in the world. You will find child mortality comparable to some of the poorest countries in the world. So that, again, it may no longer be about countries or geographic confine of a certain country. It may be situations and settings. In our jargon, we have heard a lot, how do we walk the last mile, so that we don't leave anyone behind. I think that was the idea. And I've always been challenging ourselves to say, well, if the problem is indeed in the last mile, the response, that should be our first mile of response. But often, unfortunately, it comes as an afterthought. And if it comes as an afterthought, it's going to be too late, for too many. And in the areas where we work, if those that are in greatest needs and that are hardest to reach are not addressed, talked to, engaged with, we find our situations, in situations of global fragilities and vulnerabilities that come to bear when we have big shocks. Some of the slogans that I used to hear a lot during the COVID pandemic, for example, was, none of us is safe until we all are. Well, that is true, but if now we practice our response, is our response really guided, by the same slogan that none of us is safe until we all are? Because it shows really big dysfunctionalities in all our systems, dysfunctionalities in terms of equity or lack thereof, dysfunctionality in terms of accountability, dysfunctionalities in terms of trust. And I'll come back to that. I was saying that, leadership does not mean, anything if at the end of the day it does not respond to people's needs. But leadership will have no meaning if we make promises and we break them. Too many promises made in the area of health and development, too many of them broken without accountability. And then the result of that today that we are seeing and experiencing everywhere, is the lack of trust. Trust in institutions, trust in science, trust in evidence, and then more tendency even to believe, what we consider to be intox, infox and fake news. All of that, being exacerbated, by the fact that Partly, we promise a lot, we deliver a little. So leadership is about then keeping promises, delivering on them. If we think that we cannot, so then let's change the promise on time, and that is really important. We all know that life is changing, and the things that we work on are volatile, they're dynamic, and then they can also change. But let's change them on time. We promised the health for all by the year 2000. We're 2023. We promised back in 1970s, after the Alma Ata Declaration, primary health care. We are back now, 2023, to talk about the importance of primary health care, and then to start where, the needs are greatest. We promise universal health coverage, and Ilona and I are one of those who are engaging very much at the political level to make sure, that it really happens. So we have to deliver on that. We promised a lot during COVID that we did not deliver on. And I think we are still, looking at, living the consequences, of that. Now, let me just talk to some of the characteristics, that would be very important if we have to address those situations of abnormalcy, non-normalcy, and then deliver in those settings which are not easy. If it was easy, my goodness, would we be needed? If it was easy, why would we need leaders and then leadership? So leadership is also to operate, to learn to operate in very difficult circumstances. Where we engage in a journey where we do not know necessarily where the end is. And that journey is paved, by so many challenges, so many risks, along the way. Some of them we can be aware of in order to manage them. Some of them, I think, will come our way unexpectedly. Then we can reflect on what are those attributes that are necessary, if those unexpectedly, come our way and we don't know about them. I'm sure you know many of those. And I apologize if I bore you with, some of those attributes that are really so evident and so important. They are so important because this journey I'm talking about is the journey of test. We'll be tested on a daily basis. We'll be tested at different levels. And the question will always be, will we pass those tests? Our knowledge will be tested. Do you know what you are talking about? So it's important that we always, equip ourselves in whatever areas we work, to know enough about it, but at the same time be open to continuously learn, because things, do change. The day we stop learning, that is that day that we will start, going, backwards. And that requires a great level of humility. A humility that will force us, to question ourselves and question our certainties about many issues. Not to doubt, but to open ourselves, to new knowledge, to open ourselves, to new learning, in order to at least, if not pass, stand, the test, of knowledge that we'll be confronted with. Our staff will test us. The most junior one will test us. Even interns will come and test you. Because they Google, everything. They go to the net, 20 hours a day, and then come and challenge you in different ways. That is the test. The other test is a test of integrity and consistency. So, the most difficult thing and the most dangerous sometimes, is to stand so firm for something and then behave the next day or in a different circumstances do something different. That is deadly. You lose trust, you lose respect, you lose consideration, and then we cannot motivate or guide or lead anybody along that path. That consistency and integrity is underlined by truth. Truth in the fact that I don't need to know everything, but I need to be humble also to say I don't know. I'm thinking about it. And what is beautiful about being truthful all the time, I think it is Mark Twain, we put it in the most beautiful way. The beautiful thing about telling the truth, you don't have to remember. So, because you're consistent, about it. Today, if you watch soccer, there is this new technique called VAR, which is a video-assisted referee, that you can go back, to the action and then say, I think in all our areas of work, there is a VAR today. I think every statement we make, every lecture we give, everything we say to our staff or stand for, people will go back, one day and watch it and then test you against, your behavior of today, including what I'm telling you now, and I know that is being recorded, which is fine. Ethics is also extremely important. I don't need to say more. Fairness is another test, every day. And we have now a lot of change, I think, in attitudes and behaviors and expectations, of people, particularly young people and then young talented people. They want to be associated with something that does good. They want to be associated, with, someone, that delivers, someone also that shows respect. They want to be associated with somebody that shows also empathy. And this has changed. I can remember, even in my own professional life, where people were looking up to an authoritarian leader. So you come in, and everybody is sitting and waiting for you to set the tone, to give the vision, to develop a strategy, and so on. Today, you were challenged on day one. And I think, for me at least, it's a healthy thing. But we need to adjust and adapt to that. People see it in many different ways. There is a type of an authoritarian leader, there is a type of a democratic leader, there is a type of an empathetic leader. No, there is nothing like those different types. Those are different situations. You'll find yourself in situations where you will have to be an authoritarian leader, where only control and command work. If you work in conflict setting, where bullets are flying, and then you need to deliver in a very short window, and then live to save yourself, save your stuff, save your asset. It's a control and command. It doesn't mean that you are the authoritarian leader, but in that setting, that is what is needed to be compassionate, with your people, also to care about, them in order, not to, be those heroes, and martyrs that we have seen too many, unfortunately, that died to care. The most difficult thing that I've experienced ever, for me, when we talk about these issues is that you say all these things that I'm saying, you try to demonstrate it, and then people engage with you. You go down to Syria, you lost 50 of them. You go down to Yemen, you lose 15 of them. You go down to DRC, you lose another number, of them. And those are the kind of situations where, words like being compassionate, words like being accountable, words, like, creating and enabling and safe environment for operation. Words, leading, with accountability and managing the risks, that are paved along the way. Those are not only words, these are situations. And it's a matter of life and death in many of the settings that, we are talking about. But I think if you work in those areas, health, development, humanitarian, it's about caring. I think we built a community of carers who care a lot about others. I'm not sure we always care enough about each other, because leadership is very lonely. And I think each of us will find ourselves, when we're in a position of leadership, to be often at time in a very, very lonely space. I was joking with my colleagues at the Federation of Red Cross. My first day, the first meeting I had was with the Staff Association. They come in and then welcome and present me, with what they do and how important, staff and caring for staff is. And by the way, we heard, that you were doing great things about that. And then show me the first page. Every staff member can be member of the Staff Association, except the Secretary General. I say, well, I think if you want to know what the definition of loneliness is, that is exactly so what it is. Because you will have, the buck will stop with you, where you will have to make, decisions. You can consult, you will engage, you will get inputs, you will do all those nice things, but you got to decide. And that will happen in the loneliness of leadership. And sometimes when we describe it, we put words, together that may seem to contradict each other. But in fact, they complement. And unless we're able to do both, we will fall short, on our leadership journey. You will have to be comfortable in loneliness, but you don't walk alone at the same time. Does it sound contradictory? Maybe, but that is what you need to do. So you need also to manage, many of those tensions. I talk about, humility that is very required. But often, in certain settings, in institutions, in particular, humility, can be misinterpreted, as some kind of a weakness. So we always, call on leaders to be humble without being weak. And that's the art, of a combination. We're going to be very firm, at times. Because when the time comes to deliver, and then to be accountable and then bear the responsibility, a firm decision, is required. But it does not have to be rude. We can be very firm, but never be rude, at the same time. Many times, sometimes I discuss with colleagues, and that's where some cultural dimensions, come in. Well, they'd call on their nationalities, or on their cultural background, and say, no, you don't worry, you know me, so we are very blunt. We are X, because we are very blunt, we call a spade, and I think that's what it is. I say, well, that's not what it is, that is rude. Whatever you call it, to your background, that's not, right happens. You can be very firm, but also, because in order to be heard, you don't have to shout. You can be heard without being loud, at the same time. And I think, people, learn with times and then through, engagement in different settings that leaders, they get much attention. Or when they speak, you can hear the flies, on the wall. They don't speak loud. They don't shout, at anybody. You can think of the ones you know, and then you can identify with the Kofi Annans, of this world, and others. Never hear, the tone up. But that's where you're heard, most of the time. Young colleagues, getting into senior management positions, read many books, about, leadership. And often they tell me, they use this word, you have to be assertive. Can you tell me how to be assertive? And often, the way, they express, that assertiveness is bordering, arrogance. And I think whatever words we put there, let's make sure that we never fall into, the arrogance. And leaders can easily be arrogant. Because you are up there lonely, you have there people looking up to you. And what I did not mention, which is reality, there is a lot of privileges, that come with that. So sometimes people don't even know your name. They call you, big title. That, and all of that, if one is really not careful, because only human beings, and that is the reason why we are calling on all these attributes, that come together. It can easily go up to our heads, and then we become, something else. And that's where the vigilance, is about. Leaders have to be vigilant with themselves. We have to be vigilant, with each other. And that's the reason why I was saying, well, we care a lot about others. I'm not sure we care enough about each other. But that is something maybe we can discuss, how we build that community of carers where we feel safe among ourselves, to question our certainties. And then we feel safe enough also to doubt, simply. And then, have those moments of reflections, and feedback, and then mutual caring. But our leaders also do empower. And sometimes it is a tricky thing. Empowerment, does not mean shifting the burdens of your responsibility and your burdens of accountability to somebody else's shoulders. You will have to bear, the responsibilities while empowering, while delegating, but ultimately always also remain, who you are as a leader, and then what you account for, and what your responsibilities are. When I say all of this, it does not happen in a vacuum. Often we come in organizations and in institutions where there were many people there before us, and that's always good to remember. So I think often we come to a place, we are elected, nominated, or we're given a position, and we tend to forget that there was someone there before. There were many, many people there before us, and maybe we're building on, their work, we are building on their legacy, we are building on their results. And this is very critical. I'm going to give you one example. I was working in Somalia. I was at that time with UNICEF and then Global Emergency Coordinator for the Horn of Africa. Al-Shabaab, which is the terrorist group in Somalia, decided one day that all organizations have to leave. All UN, Red Cross, NGOs, wherever you are, just leave. And I tell you, if you know Al-Shabaab and you know Somalia, if they tell you leave, so you leave. So we had some discussions, in what they call senior management team in the UN, and we were theorizing the theory about some were when to leave, and then others would say how to stay. So I was one of those pushing on how to stay and not when to leave. And I said, what are you going to do? Let me just try. And I told you at the beginning that you will be faced always with situations that are not expected, and that you need not, learn, and you need not know that it will happen that way. But of course, I think there will be some attributes, behind that I said that will force you, to do something, because inaction will not be a solution if you have to deliver. And I said, well, let me go and talk to Al-Shabaab guy. I said, are you crazy? So, well, I'll just try, talk to him. I'm not doing anything, I'll just talk. I come, I greeted him very politely. before I came, so he did his homework, who I was, where I was coming from, my organization. And I started to say, well, I'm Elhadj As Sy from, he stopped me. He said, yes, you're from UNICEF. I said, yes. Okay, you can stay. I said, thank you very much, sir. And he said, you can stay because you never left us. So, the message went to New York. Everybody was congratulating me. Because my name is Elhadj, maybe because I'm Muslim, that's what makes a difference. Or I possess, I don't know, some crazy skills. But what it means is that there were colleagues before me over a period of time when it was difficult. They were always there. They were always there on the side, of the people, always there on the side of the communities to do their work. So that when I come, I can build, on their legacy. So I would have liked, to show and then brag for something I did. But in this case, for example, you did nothing. You never left us, meaning that people were there always, working for you. So it means two things. It's so difficult to build trust in the middle of a crisis. So being there before, being there during, and most importantly, being there after is very important. How many times, do we intervene, somewhere? And when the day we think that maybe the situation is improving, we start packing until the next shocks, come around. When we got, big outbreak, and I witnessed that, in Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea, during the Ebola outbreak. I arrived at the airport. It was full of colleagues whom I know. Some of them I knew. Others, because we always carry those vests, and the blue vest, the khaki vest, and then the red vest, depending on which organization we belong to. The majority were leaving because there was an outbreak. Because their countries were calling them back because they were not safe. Maybe their families were calling them back. And then we leave behind what we call our national staff, because they have nowhere to go. We leave behind the communities. Until the situation now is normal, then we want to come back, and we would like to build trust. It doesn't work that way. Consistently, be there, exercise leadership, is that, which is, extremely important. Well, I think we will, one point in time, I would like, to show you a very, very short video, because we're in Salzburg. I think it's quite appropriate. So I will not comment it, you just look at it and then see, how it resonates, with you in terms of knowing your stuff and exercising leadership in that regard on the one hand, and on the other hand, creating and enabling a safe environment and empower somebody to deliver in a most difficult situation. Let me stop here, Ilona, and then maybe we can have a discussion. Thank you very much.